Hey gang. So yeah, my output lately has been less than ideal. Yes, I've been going through a lot of personal baggage, and there's nothing wrong with that. If any of you need time for your mental well-being, and you can, take it. But another issue I've been having is that I really haven't found anything new to respond to. Don't get me wrong, there are still lots of videos out there that promote hatred, bigotry, or misunderstandings of science that I could respond to, but so many of them are just rehashing of questions I've already covered. I'm assuming my viewers are looking for something new. If they want me to just repeat myself, they can always view my older videos. Good point. Anyway, I did come across something interesting. Dr. Brian Thompson is a biologist, but one of the rare breeds that thinks the buildup of mutations chosen via natural selection isn't enough to account for the diversity of life. Most of his work these days is with the Institute of Creation Research. So, you can understand my interest was piqued when I came across a video from the ICR of his discussing mutations. What I found fascinating was the fact that he didn't say anything that was technically wrong, but managed to phrase things in such a way to convince his viewers that mutations are not beneficial in the long term. At least, that's what the comment section shows. Let's take a look.
I was curious, does this mean that every mutation is going to be a negative mutation, or could there be the possibilities of them being a positive mutation and all the negative ones being cycled out by evolution?
Good question. So we have to define negative and positive.
Right.
Yeah, it does seem like a good place to start, especially since he doesn't actually get around to defining what a negative or positive mutation is in this video. A positive, or beneficial mutation, is a change in the genetic code at the germ level that helps an organism thrive, generally meaning it helps them survive or breed better than the rest of the population. Being able to move a little faster than the rest of the population, able to reach resources better, appearing more attractive to the opposite sex, or being able to shoot optic blasts out of your eyes are all examples of mutations that benefit the organism and will allow it to thrive and pass on its genes. Although, thinking about it, I don't believe the last one would be considered an accurate representation of evolution in action. Since the organism is more likely to spread its genetic material, the beneficial mutation will be passed on throughout the population. As mutations build up, eventually the new population becomes so different from the original population it can be considered a different species. In contrast, a negative or detrimental mutation is a change that makes it harder for an organism to survive compared to the rest of the population, so they are less likely to pass on those detrimental changes to their genetic code. They'll be outcompeted by the more adept organisms in the population.
But basically, biologically, the vast majority of mutations that we see and measure that accumulate, they're called nearly neutral. So that's what the basis for Kondrashov's paper was when he said, "Why haven't we died 100 times over?" Is because he recognized the accumulation, the relentless accumulation of near neutrals. And so they're not really that negative. And they're so slight in their effect, or maybe no effect, that they don't produce enough of a phenotypic difference for a disease to come from it. And therefore you don't get selected out, for example, assuming a selection model.
Again, he is technically correct.
You are technically correct. The best kind of correct.
The vast majority of mutations are neutral, causing an almost imperceptible change between generations. This is why humans who evolved separately from each other will have various cosmetic differences, but on a genetic level, we are all almost completely identical.
Is it possible, theoretically, that you have a randomization of your DNA that helps positive change?
Yes, but it's not possible theoretically. We have evidence of positive changes. The famous Lenski experiments showed a change in the genome of E. coli resulting in a population that can take advantage of a new food source. My science advisor for these videos did a similar experiment with yeast cells with the mutation rate augmented by UV light in order to survive off a sugar they couldn't have digested before. Positive mutations are an actual observed phenomena.
We think about nylon-eating bacteria. Okay, nylon-eating bacteria suddenly can eat nylon, but they already had the machinery to digest and process a very similar protein-based substance. And so a mutation causes them to lose some sort of control on the ability to generate those enzymes. So they manufacture an excess of those enzymes, and now they can eat nylon, something like that.
I feel I need to add some clarification here. The famous nylon-eating bacterium doesn't actually eat nylon. It adapted to thrive in the waste products of the manufacture of nylon, not the nylon itself. Even I made that mistake in the past. I want to bring it up to show that yes, I will admit my mistakes when presented with the evidence. The point remains the same though. A species of bacterium had a mutation that enabled it to thrive in a new environment that allowed it to use a food source that it couldn't have digested in the past, resulting in a brand new strain of that organism.
So is that positive? Well, it's positive for that specific spot.
It gives them a new use.
But once the nylon goes away, then the germs of the same species without that mutation, they outcompete the mutants, and the mutants are gone. So they're less fit in the context of the whole world because they've lost the ability to deploy different traits. All their resources are being pulled into overproduction of an enzyme, and they no longer have the same amount of resources to produce whatever bacteria need to pioneer different environments. So there's a trade-off there. But the bottom line is you started with bacteria Escherichia coli and you end with a mutant E. coli, and there's no net evolution.
And this is where he's trying to throw shade on the idea of evolution, that there's no net evolution, whatever that means, because circumstances may change to result in the benefit no longer being, well, beneficial. If a population changes in one way to take advantage of a resource, then lose that advantage when the resource goes away, evolution has still occurred. Dr. Thomas neglects to mention that environments are constantly changing, and the species within those environments are constantly adapting to those environmental changes. Evolution is not an oracle. It doesn't plan for what will be. It only works within the bounds of where the organisms and populations find themselves. And if an environment reverts to what it was in the past, it will benefit the organisms to evolve to thrive in that environment, becoming more like their ancestors. If we look at the ancestry of cetaceans, their fish ancestors left the water for the land, and then, millions of years later, moved back to the water. While they evolved similar features to fish, a streamlined body shape, fins and tails suited for aquatic life, they did not become fish again. Only uneducated buffoons would think that dolphins and whales are fish.
You know, the whale is not really a fish. They're mammals like you and me.
Is that true?
No.
It has to be noted that a population cannot go back to being a species it was before. It may become similar, but it will ultimately remain a different species. On a more macro level, if an organism changes from its original population so much that it can no longer breed with that population, it will never go back to being able to breed with the original population, no matter how similar the two have become. Dr. Thomas uses trickery and verbal sleight of hand to implant the idea in his audience that if an organism returns to a previous environment, then no net evolution occurs, and implies therefore that evolution is not occurring. This is simply not true. The long-winded point I'm getting at is that even if a population eventually returns to something similar as to what it was before, evolution has still occurred. Hey, so before the rest of you all jump to the comment section to berate me about how Cyclops' powers have actually been a hindrance to him and that uncontrolled optic blast would be considered a negative mutation if Scott Summers wasn't given the glasses, and later visor, made of ruby quartz, the only known natural substance that can block Cyclops' optic blasts, I do have to remind you that his original mutant power did in fact give him control over said optic blast, and it was only after his parents' private plane, the Mosquito, was attacked by the alien ship from the Shi'ar Empire that abducted his parents, his father Christopher eventually becoming the space pirate Corsair with his crew the Starjammers, that Scott received a head injury after leaping out of the plane with his brother Alex, who would grow up to the mutant Havoc. The only parachute they had caught fire. This was shown in a flashback caused by the Fear Lord Despire in Uncanny X-Men 144. Said injury was the reason why his optic blasts were uncontrollable, not the mutation itself. Man, comics are weird.